Welcome to Create Before Consume. Now, here's your host, Fitz.
So, welcome to Create Before Consume, a podcast from creators for creators. And today we are having something special going on because we're in a different location. And actually, if you can see this right here, we're here by Dani, and she is a breathing expert. And that sounds now very interesting. Can you explain what that means?
So I teach people how to first and foremost believe in their breath. So a lot of people think, oh, I breathe all the time, so no big deal. I don't have to learn anything about it. But people spend so much time and energy and effort about what are they eating? How often are they eating? What are they exercising? All of that kind of stuff. So if you focus more on how you're breathing and what breathing can do for you, then you can become educated on breathing techniques and the science behind it. So first and foremost, I try to convince people, hey, pay attention to your breath and then learn how to apply it. So I teach them variations from pranayama, breathwork, freediving, respiratory therapy, sports performance, emotional wellness. I really go through a lot of different styles so that you can learn not only how to breathe quote unquote properly, but also like, are you anxious or are you trying to go to sleep or are you really lethargic and you need energy? So yeah.
This is actually quite interesting because now I have to make an outing here because this is actually very helpful for me because I'm a very stressed person and that resonates in terms of like, oh, my heart rate is too high.
We can drop it right now. Like I can prove it to you on your watch.
That's what I was like trying to get into because like I hear by the Alex Huberman or Andrew Huberman. Andrew Huberman, those sighs that everybody's doing. So it actually really works. So you kind of do it automatically when you're really stressed. You're just like...
Well, every emotion, every thought you have is a breathing technique. So think if you're surprised... If you're relieved, laughing is a breathing technique, crying is a breathing technique. When you're really full, you know, legitimately every single thing you've ever felt is communicated through your breath.
That is like really weird to think about it, but it makes a lot of sense. And like, I really believe in it because like with like my higher heart rate, I really can kind of control it. I'm obviously not a master at it. And I'm like, just like realizing like, I need to get my heart rate lower because like it's continuously too high because I'm continuously too stressed, what is not really healthy. And that's why I'm like, okay, I need to practice breathing. But what would be like things you would recommend for like that kind of sort of thing, like to relax more? Because I think everybody's nowadays very stressed, has a lot going on, and they maybe don't even know that they can control how stressed they are.
Yeah, the most important key to relaxation is through the exhalation. So you have to think that your heart, your circulatory system, is best friends and business partners with your respiratory system. So the only reason your lungs exist is to take the oxygen from the atmosphere and put it into your bloodstream. And then the only job your heart has is to pump all of that oxygenated blood, and then of course deoxygenated blood through your system. So if you think of your heart as the engine of your car and think of your lungs as the gas tank. So if I'm filling up my gas tank with more oxygen, the job of my heart now has a full tank of gas. It needs to pump that through my system. If I exhale all of that breath out, I'm not filling up the gas tank. So I'm not giving my engine a load of gas to do anything with. It gets a break. So as you extend your exhalation and eventually maybe even your suspensions, retentions, breath holds at the top and bottom of the breath, you're extending your respiratory rate and you're giving your heart a break. You're giving it more time to recover. You're giving it time to slow down. And it's really fascinating because the one thing, if I could teach anybody to remember, is exhale longer than your inhale and exhale as slowly in duration as you can, and you'll drop your heart rate immediately.
This is really amazing because that is like one of those things where I'm like, okay, you actually can have an impact on your like condition because like theoretically, okay, my heart rate is continuously too high, that maybe cuts off a couple of years, and you basically can save a couple of years.
And And pranayama, so a lot of people aren't familiar with the term pranayama. It's basically ancient yogic science behind breathing techniques. They actually calculate your lifespan in breaths and heartbeats versus years. Because somebody who's over breathing constantly is putting more wear and tear on their heart or their system. So think of a car that you buy with 300,000 miles versus 60,000 miles.
This makes too much sense. It's nearly like kind of too scary, because like this is like one of those things. Okay, I'm like realizing it, and after I'm realizing, I'll try to practice it, but I don't know how to practice it. And
that's why I exist.
Yeah. So what do you do then? What is like your thing that you offer to people, and how did that lead into like creating videos?
So the first thing I have is a free breath awareness program, because you cannot change something if you are not first conscious and aware of it. So I offer a free breath awareness program that gives people the capacity and the wherewithal and the ability to say, oh shit, let me look at my breathing pattern. Am I overbreathing? Because your watch can tell you, like maybe not if you're overbreathing, but it tells you your heart rate's up. So you need to look at, how am I breathing? Yeah. And then once you're aware of the breath, then I have a breath technique training where I teach people 60 different breathing techniques. It's all online. I teach them the anatomy first. So let's even figure out what we're using to breathe. Then we go into the physiology. So your CO2 tolerance, your oxygen saturation, all of that, the heart rate, all of that. Then we go into the psychology of like, oh, well, am I feeling lethargic? And do I actually need to get my heart rate up? Because it's not a one size fits all, which is also my mission with breath guidance, is that I'm trying to educate people not only to believe in their breath and not only how to use their breath, but that every single breathing technique has a specific time and place that it's best suited for. So someone who's anxious versus someone who's depressed are going to use two different breathing techniques.
Okay, this goes kind of like deep now, because like I would not. How does a person breathe if they're depressed?
So you want to typically, again, this is, I like to also think of breathing techniques as prescriptions. So let's say you're depressed and you go to a physician, and they have a plethora of medications that they can prescribe you. And what might work for you might not work for me. And maybe you need a different dose, or maybe you need a different brand or a different schedule of that dose, right? It's the same thing with the breath, because your breathing mechanics, your breathing patterns and habits are different than mine. Your oxygen saturation, your heart rate, your CO2 tolerance, which is really important. All of that's different than mine. All of it's malleable. We can train it and we can make it more efficient. And kind of using the analogy of the engine and the gas in the car, it's kind of like I could have, let's say we both can fit 4 liters of air, even though because you're a guy, you can actually fit 2 more liters than I can. But let's just pretend we can both fit 4 liters. I would be like the Prius. So you put 4 liters of air in me, I'm going to go forever. But you might be the diesel truck where you're like, you put 4 liters in you're not going to get very far. So my CO2 tolerance, my oxygen efficiency is more efficient than yours. So there's so much that goes into it.
This is like, it's kind of wild, because like I was a runner I think like 4 years ago, and then I had a knee injury and I was running with my wife, and I'm like, I'm really good with running. I can go for 5 miles, whatever. And it's like, she got used to it and she got better than me, and I'm like, you didn't even have as much practice. And I'm just like, why you're so efficient? But she's also lighter, and like there's obviously differences in the autonomy and everything. And
and she might be utilizing her fuel, because you have to think your breath is the primary fuel for your cells, right? Glucose, food, but breathing. So you can go 3 weeks without putting food in your body. You can go 3 minutes, maybe. Well, I can go a lot longer than 3 minutes, but
how long can you? So now I'm curious.
So before we get to that, I do want to answer how do you breathe for depression. So even though it's different for everyone, and so I wanted to preface that, but overgeneralization, you're going to increase your respiratory rate. So you're going to breathe quicker and you're going to breathe fuller. So you have volume. You don't just, there's so much, right? The anatomy, the physiology, the psychology, but you also have, okay, what are our breathing mechanics, the muscles we're using? How much volume, like liters, are we actually bringing into our body? At what speed? How fast is it going? What's the pressure? What's the duration? All of those things are going to change how it affects your body. So overgeneralization for most people, if you're depressed, breathe faster, like you could even do a...
That's what I do all the time. I'm like, I don't know if that's even good for me.
And it's a pick me up for most people. Now, if I was anxious, I would be breathing in a like really long breathing pattern. I'm really slowing things down. I might add some breath holds. Yeah.
Right now, I'm like kind of worried that I maybe do my breathing wrong, because like there's apparently hyperventilation, what happens when people breathe too fast, too long, and they panic. I think it maybe if I described it correctly. So what are the things that people typically do wrong, and what is like the easy fix and guidance that you give?
So I try to steer away from labeling things good, bad, right, or wrong.
Gotcha.
Just because there's always exceptions to the rule and there are always nuances. And then that also puts people in a mindset or a framework of like some people will say you should only ever nasal breathe or you should only ever diaphragmatic breathe. And I'm like, I understand why you're saying that, but that's not true for all situations. Like running, if you're training, then yes, you want to use the nose, you get more nitric oxide, you vasodilate, you're getting better oxygen efficiency through training. But if you are going at the Olympics to sprint, you're not going to perform breathing your best. You're not going to perform your best just breathing through your nose. So you're going to have to use your mouth. So same thing with diaphragmatic breath. If you only ever diaphragmatically breathed, again, for performance, it's not going to work for you. But if you're sitting on the couch, if you're talking to me here, that makes sense. So again, I just want to preface that before I say breathe this way or breathe that way or this is right or that's wrong. But most Westerners have inefficient breathing patterns. So you're autonomically breathing, meaning you don't have to think how you breathe, but you can, but you don't have to.
Yeah.
So your phrenic nerve, your neural networks go through this pattern of, it's kind of how when you drive home and you don't know how you got there.
Yeah, you just did it.
You're like, I somehow just made it home and I don't even remember passing 4th Street or 22nd Avenue or whatever it is. Your breathing pattern is the same thing. But if you train your awareness of your breath, if you train how to breathe, then let's say like when I was watching you breathe before we started, like you're what we call a chest breather.
Yeah.
And I would say that would be not ideal.
Okay.
If you want to relax, you want to diaphragmatic breathe, you want to drop your breathing mechanics lower, and you want to stimulate your vagus nerve and increase your vagal tone and your HRV and so on and so forth.
All that stuff. Damn. This is kind of crazy because like I did not know that I needed that much because like my wife had like a terrible accident and like my stress like multiplied like terrible because of the brain injury, medical bills and all that stuff, and running a business, now working for 2 people, doing basically 2 things at once. And I'm just like, okay, I'm stressed. And my watch is telling me like, I'm stressed. And I'm just like, okay, I hear like you do those sighs, and I was doing them all the time. And I did not know that I'm like, oh, I'm stressed, and that's why I'm doing them.
Your body's doing it. You're not consciously doing it.
Yeah, and I'm just realizing that. I'm like, oh, I'm doing the sighs, and I'm like, am I stressed? And I'm like, this goes so deep that I didn't even know how deep it goes, and this makes a lot of sense. So when people come to you, what is like expected? Like, let's say, how long do you have to practice till it becomes actually natural? Relatively.
Yep, right. It's all relative. I'm a relative kind of gal, right? Because I have worked in this business long enough to see so many different variations. But I would say that typically, like if we were to do a one-on-one session, I would do an in-depth breath assessment on you. So I would assess your breathing mechanics. I would see what you are able to control, like your neuromuscular ability through all of your breathing mechanics, not just the thoracic diaphragm or the intercostals, like literally everything. There's so much more muscle and anatomy involved in breathing than people realize. Like you can breathe with your pelvic floor, you can breathe with your back muscles. So we would do that. I would measure your CO2 tolerance, I would measure your oxygen saturation, your heart rate, and I would do all of this through different breathing techniques to see how that changes. And then from there, I would ask, what are your goals? And you would say, hey, I'm really freaking stressed, And then I would give you practices to see, how does this feel? How does that feel? How does that feel? Because remember, we're finding that right prescription and that right dose and that right technique that's going to be for you. And then you get homework. So then depending on if you do, and that's honestly, that is the biggest thing, because people come to me and they don't want to do the work. It's the same way you go to a trainer. You're like, or like our Sheldon, he's going to a fruit festival or something like that. I'm like, you're not going to perform. I gave him a hard time because you're not running, you're not biking, you're not swimming, you're not doing what you need to do to succeed. So I try to say that to people, like, if you're coming to me or anyone else to train your breath, you have to do the work and you have to be realistic about that work. So don't overcommit, because if you don't love doing it, if you don't enjoy doing it, if you don't see those immediate results, because you do get immediate results with the breath, but you want that subconscious autonomic training so that when you're sitting here talking to me and you're not looking at your breath, that training is then going through your system.
What I really liked was I saw you created live streams on, I think, Instagram or YouTube as well, where you just like sit there for an hour and you're just breathing for an hour. It sounds funny when you say it, but it's like, if you understand like how important breathing is and how it impacts your life and like your performance and everything, I'm like, this is actually like pretty neat. So how did you get into the whole thing at all? Because like, did you randomly decide that I'm become a professional breather? What is the story?
So I tried to explain it that many roads converged onto one because I was a long distance runner. I was a free diver. I was a free diver before I knew what free diving was. I grew up on the beach and you're always just holding your breath and swimming out to the buoys, you know. I had experienced anxiety in my early 20s, and my dad died, and I had all these things start to happen where I was like not feeling in control. I was not feeling who I was before all these things started to happen, and I also wasn't feeling like my best self. So I wanted to perform better running, because running was like my mental therapy to feel better.
I love that.
And I'm just a type A where I'm like, can I go faster? Can I go farther? So on and so forth. Free diving, I also wanted to get better at holding my breath. But the anxiety and the depression, I think, was what drove me to more of a brink of like, fine, I'll try breathing techniques. Why are all these people telling me to try breathing techniques? Because I was a non-believer. I did not think it was going to do what I needed it to do. And then I also found yoga, and they do a lot of breathing. So there was many things that got me to try it. And when I did try it, I mean, really sat down and breathed, which you said, oh, you're teaching these hour-long classes focusing on the breathing techniques. That's really hard to do. Most people's attention can't stay on that. So I teach in a style where we integrate tons of different breathing techniques to keep their attention. And then the more refined you get, you go into the same breathing technique over and over again, which technically is backwards if you're going traditional approach. You want to start less is more at first, but nowadays I can't get people to be that disciplined and devoted.
I kind of wanted to say, because like we did like that breathing thing, it's on the other recording, and I'm just like sitting there and you're telling me what to do, and I'm like, okay, I want to move on, I want to do the other thing, and I'm just like so in that hype rush, and I'm like a really ADHD positive engaged guy, so it's like I'm very fast, and it's like I should slow down and I should practice counting and doing the breaths and doing all that. And even when I played guitar, I was like, okay, now I have to count instead of like actually just doing what I want to do. I want to just do what I want to do with like, you know, just like spinning free. And nowadays with like social media, everybody's like, no attention span, scroll. And it's like, it's not anymore that peacefulness.
Well, you have to think of two things, right? First is you have to meet people where they are. So I can teach to people like you. Like I have learned, I'm not going to keep you engaged. So how do I keep you engaged? So that's the first thing. Meet people where they are. Stop expecting, and this is in all realms of anything, stop expecting people to be where you want them to be, because they're not there yet. So give them time and give them resources and tools to get where you want, right? And then the second thing is that when you are trying to refine your breath and you're trying to create, I call it a relationship with your breath, you have to be willing to not only explore, but you have to be willing to do the work of the repetition, to almost be bored enough to get it to work, because the key to mastery is repetition. Any great composer, any great content creator, any great whatever you have done it thousands and thousands and thousands of times. And I think that people don't appreciate that. And they, again, I was the same. one little story I'll say is when I first did my 500-hour pranayama teacher training. So I went and I did a 40-day immersion where literally you were breathing from 6 a.m. until 8 p.m. at night. The whole time. You do not stop. So it was a very traditional style of training.
I think we need to clarify that a little bit, because like if you stop breathing, you die. So what does that mean, you didn't stop breathing?
That means I had to pay attention to my respiratory rate, my respiratory pattern, so my breathing pattern the entire time. So I'm breathing, and so you're saying, what's the count? And the same way that if I was playing guitar for that many hours a day, I'm not just going to be strumming autonomically. Like I'm going to know what note am I playing, where are my hands, what's the chord, so on and so forth. And so I was doing that with the breath, and I remember getting so frustrated and angry and bored and kind of upset with my instructor, because I was like, I came here for the fancy shit. Like I want to learn, I want to up level,
I want to
be
something.
Yeah. And he gave me a hard time, rightly so, because I thought I knew, whatever. Yeah. And I was doing a technique that was simple. It was a simple a simple 2-part breath, 3 seconds into my belly, 3 seconds into my heart, 3 seconds out from my belly, 3 seconds out from my heart, the whole time for hours on end, doing that consistently. And this was a structured of discipline technique where I couldn't like itch my nose. I couldn't move. So you have to sit the whole time. Oh. And I was getting so frustrated. I wanted to move on. And then all of a sudden I had this, I don't know if I would call it an out-of-body experience, but it was a spiritual experience. It was a connection to my life force that I have never had before. I wasn't doing the fancy hyperventilation breathwork that will get you there faster. It will. It totally will. I'm doing a 6 count in breath and a 6 count out breath, just focusing on the breathing mechanics I'm using. And I, for lack of better articulation, touched God. I was like, oh my.
Kind of trance mode or.
Yeah, like I arrived. And then all of a sudden, not all of a sudden, a while later, I came back down on my body and I was like, what? Yeah. What's that? And I was still breathing in that rate.
I have like, it's kind of like I have a couple things on my mind. I kind of want to just throw them out there and you can take them how you want, because spirituality can be nowadays can be like completely misunderstood. Like this is some hocus pocus witch stuff, but I'm like, you're a free diver, so breathing and technique has real implications, has real impact. And I like to hold my breath as well, so I can do like 3 minutes, and maybe not anymore now because I had a really bad year, but that was like, I like diving too, so I'm like, I know breathing is important. So can you go into like the facts, so that it's like, okay, this is like more than just a spiritual thing and like the science and whatever?
Yeah, so that's actually a good segue into the sense that, so I'm in school right now for respiratory therapy. So I'm getting my respiratory therapy license because I teach from the science first and foremost, because I'm a data person. Yeah. So even though I can say, oh, I touched God or whatever, that doesn't
some
mean...
people get like distracted by that and they're like getting hung up on something and then discount everything.
And it's not tangible. I can't deliver that to you in a package. I can tell you what you are using in the sense of your breathing mechanics. I can tell you how to get better. I can tell you how to strengthen them. I can tell you how to make them more flexible. I can tell you how to increase your CO2 tolerance and your oxygen efficiency and your HRV. And I can measure that and give you data. So what I'm doing is I'm going into school I'm in school for respiratory therapy, because what I want to do is, with all of the education and the training, and most importantly, the practice, right? My 10,000 hours of breathing techniques, I want to go into a lab and use myself as a guinea pig and other people as well and show, I'm going to tell them to breathe this way, and then watch what happens to their heart, to their mindset, to their sweat, to their, like literally, I just want to measure as much as I can, because the question you asked me is like, well, where's the science? Where's the data? And
some people get like, okay, I don't believe that, and they're like less spiritual. And like some people are more on that side, more on this side. And it's like, we are all somewhere on the spectrum. And like some people are very connected with their bodies, so they have a really good connection with it and they are more believing in certain things, and other people are less. But the rules still apply. Like you don't breathe, you die, or you breathe too fast, you're hyperventilate and you just like freak out and all that stuff.
And that's the best part about the breath, is that if you know how to use it, it can stop a panic attack in its tracks. If you don't know how to use it, it can induce one.
Oh, I love that. I love that. There's another thing. So this is maybe now kind of more on the funny side, because like I sometimes stop breathing and forget to breathe for a second, and then I'm hold my breath, and then I'm up. I need to breathe. So I also had like nightmares where I'm like, did I forget to breathe? And like, oh, do I breathe now when I fall asleep, or do I just like, because I'm actively thinking about breathing, and then I'm stuck in that actively thinking breathing, and then I'm like, it's kind of like a mini nightmare, and I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I have a couple. So there's conscious breath holding, so what freedivers do, and then there's subconscious breath holding, which is what you're doing when you're stressed or when you're really focused on something. So conscious breath holding is great. It trains you, your physiology, your anatomy, your psychology, which is one of the key factors. If you're a freediver, you learn mindset is everything. So conscious breath holding, amazing. Subconscious breath holding is a response when we don't want to feel. So and again, it can be like overloaded of focus, but again, we don't want to feel that overwhelm. So we kind of stop. So they say that the more you breathe, because your breath is so connected to your thoughts and your emotions, that we'll hold our breath to protect ourselves. So for instance, if you and I were in a fight and you're yelling at me, I might hold my breath in the same way that a dog would put its ears behind its head or its tail between its leg, or somebody might cross their arms when their boss is talking to them. So the breath holding is a response of your body to try to control things when you feel like you're not in control. So again, you don't want to be feeling this. This is not something you want to absorb, or I'm really
this is like a therapy session right now, and I'm just like realizing all that, and I'm like, oh.
And think of that though, when you realize just by watching your breath that, oh fuck, I'm not in the best state that I want to be in right now. And then two, I'm educated and I know how to use my breath to get into the state that I want to be in, right? So the other thing I just want to say about breath holding, especially subconsciously or even practicing conscious breathing techniques, is it's directly related to our mortality. Yeah. So some people don't like the sound of their heart rate because they're like, oh my God, I'm fragile. Yep. If that stops, I die. Same thing with their breath. When they're manipulating their breath, they think, what if I stop breathing? Like I'm not going to be here. So one of the key philosophies that we practice in pranayama is death meditations. So your first breath is the very first thing you do, and your last breath is the last thing. So that's a whole nother subject. It's very important, I think, when you really start to pay attention to your breath. But before I ever try to get people to the woo, the touching of any kind of spirit, and you don't even have to believe in that or have a connection with that, but even just the emotional aspects or the psychological aspects, I always try to give them the raw data of, let's just make you feel better. Yeah. Let's just make you more healthy. Let's just make you have better oxygen efficiency so you can set up your content and take care of your wife and do a conversation where you're like, I feel fucking great. Yeah. I don't feel exhausted. I don't feel stressed. I don't feel overwhelmed. My heart rate is in the mid 50s or 60s or wherever, right? You
don't want to see. We're currently at 110 and we were at 140.
I was going to guess 112. Yeah. That was my guess.
Like I'm running in the 90s and the hundreds nowadays, and it's not good.
I mean, again, we can change that.
Yeah. So this is like one of those things where I'm like, heart rate, I did not know it's a problem because I just work harder. I just get more work on my plate and I'm just doing more, and then I get more money, and more money equals less problems, and just pushing harder. And my physical, like my mental mindset, I don't feel pain. I'm like very robust, maybe too robust. And then I'm like,
I do that.
And then I'm just like not realizing that other things falling apart, and I'm like, oh, I'm just a human too, and not a machine in a way. What is like a weird concept when you're like, oh, I can just push through the pain and like whatever,
Well, one of the lessons I try to constantly relearn, and I think this comes from the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, is sharpening the saw. Yeah. So we're so busy sawing, and we're like, if we stop, I'm gonna drop balls. I'm not gonna get the work done. And I also, like, I climb, I freedive, I run to distract my brain from thinking, right? So working is the same thing. If I'm working, I'm not having to deal with the other chaos that's going on, or it's like controlled chaos. But if you stop for a second and you sharpen that saw, you're going to cut through the work 20 times faster. But they think if they stop to sharpen the saw that they're going to lose time and work or whatever it is.
Or get overwhelmed and it's becoming too much, whatever.
And honestly, I have to relearn this constantly, because I know if I just take time to take care of my breath and take care of myself and find the things that help me feel better so I can do better and perform better than I do. But sometimes I'm a workaholic, you know, and I like just get it done. And I forget, like, hey, you're not doing this as well as you could be if you just took a couple of seconds to be better in the doing, sharpening yourself, you know?
Yeah, or stepping back and doing something for fun and relax and all that stuff.
Yeah, I'm horrible at that.
Yeah, me too.
Really bad.
When people ask me, what do you do for fun? I'm like, this.
Yes, yeah.
What is like kind of bad. But I want to go into your content creation, because you did 5 years ago, you kind of started doing content and you did the guidance and everything. So how can people first off find you? Because like, we need to introduce that a little bit more, and also what can they expect from your content, and what does content do for you in social media?
So I feel like I have dropped the ball over the past 5 years of creating content, but my website and business is Breath Guidance. So you can find me on breathguidance.com or YouTube / Breath Guidance or Instagram Breath Guidance. I just started a TikTok / Breath Guidance. You know, whatever it is, it's Breath Guidance through and through. And I started a YouTube channel when I started my website, but I didn't commit to it in the same way that I wanted to, because I opened this business here. So I opened a brick and mortar wellness studio, and that stole all of my energy from focusing on building my online business, which is Breath Guidance. But what I did do is a few YouTube things that I thought I was going to keep consistent, and I didn't. You know, I think most creators, it is not easy at all. And my goal was to somehow communicate what I do in person, because if you and I are in person, I can communicate with your breath. I can watch how you breathe, and then I can have you teach you how to manipulate it in a way that I can connect. Yeah. I don't know how to do that yet through a screen, and I'm trying to figure it out. Yeah. So I'm really trying to figure out, how do I get you to know me and like me and trust me, so that you will listen to me when I tell you to breathe this way, and you try it, and then you trust yourself that, oh my gosh, like there's actually something to this. So I've been really good at in person. Yeah. I am learning how to be better through the screen. So that's my goal. So now I'm uploading a video once a week. We're doing this to try to figure out what is my podcast going to be like in the setup and so forth. I
love it because that's what I love about social media, because like on the one side, everybody hates on it because it's obviously not that healthy for our attention span, but for the business and marketing, it's like so powerful. Like you can make content about things that you really care about, and people will resonate about it, with it. And it's like, you maybe make like a how to breathe or whatever you do for fun, like running, jogging, whatever. And people will follow you, and then they follow your other content. It's like, oh, this is actually your profession. And the people who are really invested as you as a person, they will go down that funnel of like, oh, I want to learn more about that breathing thing. And there's like that, obviously the other strategy that, back in the day was like kind of popular, where you only do niche content, you know, but nowadays the algorithm is like, it's random. So it has to appeal to random people. So the more broad your content, the more appealing it is, and the more your other stuff gets recommended to them when they follow you. Well, it's like kind of weird concept, because you want like make random content that is very, very broad. So if a random person sees it, oh, I like that. And when they hit follow, then you maybe do like 80% like relatable content, 15% like somewhat niche, and then 5% really specific content. And the followers, they will watch your 5%, and they know like you as a person, and they will like you as a person because they're your followers. So that's what I like about it. What is a different strategy of then only doing the 5%, because most people will not resonate, and it doesn't get the engagement, so it gets low views. So that's kind of how I see social media right now. What is your strategy though currently, and goals and plans? Sorry.
Well, no, it's funny because you're making me think of a couple of different things, but the first thing is the person who I resonate with the most are like nurses, yoga teachers, physicians, counselors, high performance coaches, sports people, like people who already have some kind of career where they're applying things that are trying to make people better, right? I'm trying to improve your health. I'm trying to improve your fitness. I'm trying to improve your psychological health, whatever it is. And then they see the breathing techniques as like, oh my gosh, I can add this to my toolbox, not only for my own self-care, but for my client care, my patient care, my student care. So that's who I'm speaking to mostly through my content, in the sense that after they go through my free program and they are aware of the breath, and then they take my online program of 60 different breathing techniques. They're learning anatomy, physiology, psychology, the actual techniques. Then I want them to come to my breath teacher certification, which is in person, because I want to teach you how to be the best breath teacher that there is. And my breath guidance, the education, the certification is, I call it the Ivy League of breath education, because I make you take an exam that's on par with an Ivy League level of exam on the breath education and the teaching. So that's one thing. I actually had a thought, because everybody breathes, right?
Yeah.
Everybody breathes, but
It's
nobody,
super relatable.
but nobody wants to do the fucking work. So I literally had this thought while I was doing the dishes this morning, and I have so many people ask me about how to build a business, because I've built an online business, I've built a brick and mortar business, I've helped other people build their businesses. And I thought, well, maybe that's my other niche. Maybe I just start teaching people how to do what I've done or what I'm doing. And then, so I was like, I'll do business guidance. And then I like looked up the URL, and it was taken, of course. And I was like, biz guidance. And I was like, that's a little cheesy. And I was like, what about B guidance? Like B guidance, like beginner's guidance, business guidance, just presence, you know? So I bought that URL this morning.
There we go.
So I might start differentiating my content a little bit, because if people don't want to breathe, maybe I can get them to make some money. And then in the meantime,
I mean, like, they got the easy sell there. But going into like the things that you also did, you built this business. What is this business? What is your journey? What did you achieve? Like, what, because I don't really know you besides like, okay, you're a specialist in breathing or expert in breathing. What else did you do?
Oh, it depends on the timeline.
I've
done a lot. I was a yoga therapist,
Yeah.
and that led me to teaching, really niching down. And
Yeah.
yoga is so saturated. Now breathing is getting saturated as well. But I thought, I just love the breath. And people, they're intimidated by yoga. They don't think, if I can touch my toes, I'm not going to do yoga. Maybe they think, I've had friends think, oh, it's a religious thing that I goes against my values or whatever. So breathing was something that's relatable, entry level. Most everybody can do it. And which now I'm in respiratory therapy, so I'm learning about people on ventilators and COPD and asthma and all these other types of.
This goes actually so deep.
Like so many different things. But I really started doing my own business, and I'm listening to the E-Myth right now. It's like about entrepreneurs and the entrepreneur versus the manager versus the technician who's really good at doing the thing. And I had a moment when I was working for someone else, and I realized they didn't have my best interest in mind. And of course they shouldn't, because their business should be primary, which I didn't know at the time, because when you're an employee, you do not realize what an employer, the level of responsibility and everything that goes behind that. So I underappreciated what was going on behind the scenes of where I was working. And I was like, fuck this, I'm going to work for myself, you know? And I was like, I have enough of a following. I can create something and I can teach people. So I took all the workshops that I was doing in person and I packaged it online. And then I've made it better and better and better and better and better over the years. And now it's approved for continuing education credits, so CEs for nurses. I'm trying to continue to go into different fields so that they can apply those. So that's how I'm quote unquote selling, right?
Yeah.
But then I also had the nerve in October of 2020 to open a brick and mortar wellness studio.
Yeah.
So that I just sold that in October.
Yeah, it looks amazing.
I built two great brands. I built two completely different great businesses. And what I realized was, I don't want to be a wellness studio owner. I want to be a breath teacher, and I'm a teacher of teachers. So I don't just teach the layman. I teach, again, the nurse, the yoga teacher, the counselor.
This is actually kind of interesting, because like you had the business already, and now you're like going back into being like actually doing like the technician's work of like, hey, I'm teaching how you set it up and how to do it, and I'm making things work, and going away from the business, but you're still doing the business.
Oh yeah.
So
I'm trying to create systems, and that's part of meeting you, is like, I need people who can do the things, the technical things, like recording the video, editing the video, whatever it is that I don't want to do, so that I can keep my eye on both the primary product of breath education being the absolute best, but also the big vision of how do I get people to believe in their breath? Everyone, all of that general content person, how do I get them to breathe with me?
Yeah, I love it because there was a time, I don't know if it was like 2-3 years ago, like with the whole Wim Hof and like breathing, controlling. And there was, I don't know why, but there was a lot that popped up on social media about like breathing in general. And there was like a fitness hype about everything. And I'm like, this is a good thing. I like that. I support that. But yeah, what do you think about all those things and the hype that came with that?
I think it was great. I don't agree. Again, I don't want to say right or wrong.
Yeah,
I really want to avoid
relative.
saying that. But people do not understand what they are doing to a large degree. So Wim Hof is just a very scratch on the surface of a style of breathing techniques. And a lot of people don't realize that style of breathing can put somebody into a bad physical state, psychological state, physiological state. It's great for a lot of things. It has a use, it has an application, but it is not a one size fits all. So my job now is, now that you've realized, oh, there's something to breathing. Breathing works for certain things. It's cool, or whatever it is. Yeah. Now my job as my brand and business is to educate you on what breathing techniques to use for what purposes.
I love it. I love it. With that being said, though, we're already on a time budget, and I really enjoyed learning about like the breathing. So what is the next couple pieces of content? What do you want to focus on with your content in general, and give them a little shout out where they can find you?
Absolutely. So I have been focusing first and foremost on educating people with little snippets of YouTubes of like how to breathe for running, how to breathe for anger, how to breathe for fear, how to breathe for a flu and a cold, how to breathe for COPD, asthma. I mean, like, go to my YouTube video channel and there's whatever you could relate to, there's probably already a breathing for sleep. Everybody's got to sleep, right? Yeah. So that's what I've been doing for a while now, but I'm trying to differentiate. So I want to find like more lifestyle types of breath education. How can I make it more fun and entertaining, which I'm really not good at. I'm going to try to figure out, but also doing a podcast. Yeah. So the next person I'm going to interview is a SWAT leader and sniper. Maybe he was a sniper. I know he's a SWAT leader, but he's in that field where I'm like, how do you not only breathe for shooting and that kind of stuff, but how do you use your breath as a first responder? The last person I interviewed was a nurse anesthetist, and how you apply breathing techniques, and she was a death doula, So I have different types of people that I want to interview to spotlight and say, look, do you relate with this person? Because look at how they're using their breath and how it's changing their life.
I feel that it's very powerful because not everybody can relate like to the spiritual. And sometimes when you have like yoga teachers, or they're too much on this side and they're not approachable if you're too much on that side. And it's like, I think like having now like the complete opposite of like meditation, you bring in a sniper, is like, this is good content. Damn, this sounds very exciting.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm on a mission. I mean, I want people to believe in their breath no matter who you are, because everybody breathes. Yeah. And if you are not paying attention to your breath, you are losing so much value. You just really are. And that's the truth. Yeah,
that is deep. That is deep. With that being said, though, this was an amazing journey right now where I learned a lot about myself, what was not really intended. And I was like subconsciously holding my breath and trying to breathe normally, and I'm just like, thinking too much while talking about my breath is like complicated. But thank you so much for the podcast. And where can they find you, and what should they do?
Go to breathguidance.com and click free program and get my free breath awareness program, and just breathe along with it. There's videos, guided audios, worksheets, however you learn. Just breathe. Yeah, just breathe. Keep breathing. Become a breather. Yeah. With that being said, thanks for watching the Create Before Consume podcast, and I hope I see you in another one.